chaos, rebellion, anarchy on the high seas. When you think of a pirate, you probably picture a wild-eyed rogue, loyal to no one but himself, living a life without rules. But what if I told you that's mostly a myth? What if I told you that the most successful and feared pirate crews of the Golden Age lived by a contract, a strict, democratic, and surprisingly modern set of rules? This wasn't just some loose guideline. It was the law. They called it the Articles of Agreement, or more famously, the Pirate Code. And today, we're going to decode this unwritten law of the high seas. We'll find out how pirates created a functional society on a floating piece of wood, what their most common rules were, and the brutal punishments for anyone who dared to break them. So grab your grog and get ready to sign the articles. So why did these outlaws need rules in the first place? To understand that, you have to understand where most pirates came from. The vast majority of pirates were former sailors from the Royal Navy or merchant vessels. And life there was anything but fair. Captains were tyrants, pay was terrible, food was rotten, and punishments were brutal and arbitrary. Men were pressed into service against their will and treated as disposable property. Piracy was an escape. It was a rebellion against that oppressive system. So when these men started their own society, they wanted to make damn sure it was the exact opposite of what they'd left behind. Their goal was to create a system built on fairness, liberty, and profit. And the foundation of that system was the Articles of Agreement. One by one, they make a mark on it. Before a voyage even began, the entire crew would gather. The articles would be written up and read aloud. Every single man, from the captain to the cabin boy, had a vote. They all had to agree on the rules they would live by. Once the code was set, each pirate would swear a solemn oath. I do swear upon this sacred object to uphold the articles of this vessel, and to keep the secrets of my brethren. They'd swear on whatever was sacred to them, a Bible, an axe, crossed pistols, or even a human skull. They would then sign the articles or, since most couldn't write, make their mark. This document was then nailed to a mast or the captain's door for all to see. It was a binding contract. You weren't just a crewmate. You were a shareholder in a dangerous, but potentially very profitable, enterprise. Okay, so what did these articles actually say? While they varied from ship to ship, a lot of rules were universal. Let's break down the most common ones. First and foremost, the money. In the Navy, a sailor might wait years for a pittance. On a pirate ship, the division of plunder was spelled out clearly. The captain and the quartermaster, who acted as the crew's representative, usually received 2 shares. Officers like the boatswain or master gunner might get 1.5 shares. And every other crewman? They received 1 full, equal share. This was revolutionary. It meant every man on board had a direct stake in their success. They weren't fighting for a king or a company. They were fighting for themselves and each other. Life at sea was brutal, and piracy was even worse. Losing an eye, a hand, or a leg was a real possibility. But the pirates had a plan for that. Think of it as the world's first, and most violent, workers' compensation program. Loss of a right arm, 600 pieces of 8. Loss of a left arm, 500 pieces of 8. Loss of an eye, 100 pieces of 8. Before the rest of the plunder was divided, a special fund was set aside. If you were maimed in battle, you received a handsome payout from this fund. 600 pieces of 8 for a right arm. That was a fortune, enough to live on for the rest of your life. This guaranteed that even if a man was too injured to continue pirating, he wouldn't be left destitute. Imagine being stuck on a small ship with 100 heavily armed, hard-drinking men. Fights were inevitable, but a fight on board could lead to disaster. So, the articles were clear: no striking another man while at sea. If you had a quarrel, you had to wait until you reached shore. There, the dispute would be settled honorably with a duel of sword and pistol. This kept the peace and ensured the ship remained a functional fighting unit. This one's simple but crucial. Every pirate was expected to keep his cutlass, pistols, and knives clean, oiled, and ready for action at all times. A pirate ship could go from peaceful sailing to a life-or-death battle in minutes. An unready pirate was a liability to everyone, and laziness could get the whole crew killed. This might sound like something your parents would say, but pirate ships had a strict curfew. Lights and candles to be put out at 8 o'clock at night. Why? Because a wooden ship filled with gunpowder, tar, and rum is a massive fire hazard. If you wanted to keep drinking after 8, you had to do it on the open deck in the dark. No exceptions. To show you these weren't just general ideas, let's look at the actual articles of one of history's most successful pirates, Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts. Black Bart captured over 400 ships in his short career, and he ran a very tight ship. His articles, recorded in 1721, give us an incredible insight into pirate law. Article 1. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment, has equal title to the fresh provisions, or strong liquors, and may use them at pleasure, unless a scarcity makes it necessary, for the good of all, to vote a retrenchment. Right there. Democracy and rationing for the common good. Article 3. No person to game at cards or dice for money. They could play for fun, but gambling with money led to fights and theft, so it was banned. Article 6. No boy or woman to be allowed amongst them. If any man were to be found seducing any of the latter sex, and carried her to sea, disguised, he was to suffer death. A controversial rule, but a common one, designed to prevent jealousy and conflict among the crew. And my personal favorite, Article 11. The musicians to have rest on the Sabbath day, but the other 6 days and nights, none without special favor. Even on a pirate ship, the band got a day off. This shows a surprising level of structured day-to-day life. So the pirates had laws, but laws are meaningless without enforcement. And when you broke the pirate code, justice was swift and brutal. The punishments were as harsh as the rules were fair, and every man knew what to expect. Perhaps the most famous pirate punishment, Marooning. This was the penalty for serious crimes, like stealing from a fellow crewman. The offender was taken to a deserted island, often a barren sandbar, and left there. He'd be given a flask of water, a pistol, a bit of gunpowder, and a single shot. It was a slow death sentence. The single shot wasn't for hunting. It was to give him a gentleman's way out when the despair became too much. For lesser offenses, there was flogging. The cat o' nine tails was the whip of choice. But unlike in the Navy where a captain could order a flogging on a whim, on a pirate ship, the punishment was often decided by the quartermaster and the crew, according to the code. And for the worst crimes of all, cowardice in battle, desertion, or planning a mutiny, the penalty was death. There was no appeal. The sentence would be carried out immediately. The pirate code was a bond of trust, and breaking that trust in the heat of battle was the one sin that could never be forgiven. So, the next time you see a pirate in a movie, swinging from a rope with a wild look in his eye, remember the reality behind the myth. These men weren't just chaotic brutes. They were rebels who created a radical new form of society on the open ocean, a society with a constitution, with workers' rights, and a system of justice. The pirate code was more than just a set of rules. It was a declaration of independence. It was their way of saying that even in a lawless world, they would live by a law of their own making. What do you think? Which of these pirate rules surprised you the most? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this voyage into history, be sure to maroon that like button, subscribe to the channel for more adventures, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a thing. Until next time, keep your cutlass sharp and your eyes on the horizon.